in a forbidden land sealed off for centuries, there existed a mysterious plant that could bring the dead back to life, but it also carried a fatal flaw. It stripped away all humanity from those who used it, turning them into bloodthirsty beasts. A wild deer once accidentally ate the strange plant and soon collapsed, trembling violently on the ground until it stopped moving completely. But that wasn't the end. A second later, the deer's pale eyes snapped open. It came back to life, transformed into a savage zombie deer. From then on, it ate meat instead of grass. When it heard a tiger's roar coming from the bushes ahead, it didn't flinch in fear but instead bared its teeth fiercely, ready to take on the tiger. Even with the virus enhancing its body, the deer's combat strength had indeed improved dramatically. But the gap in size and power was far too great. In the end, the zombie deer became the tiger's dinner because of how terrifying that plant was. The local authorities declared the area a forbidden zone and strictly banned anyone from setting foot there, and this ban had lasted for 100 years. Every day, soldiers took turns patrolling the area, but even so, a fearless girl still snuck into the forbidden land where she discovered a strange plant, one that held the secret to bringing the dead back to life. Ashen returned to her tribe and told her father, the chief, what she had found. Her mother was gravely ill, so she wanted to use the plant to heal her, but her father refused to speak of it and warned Ashen never to go there again. If the government soldiers caught her, she would face the harshest punishment. Yet as they were talking, a group of Josian soldiers suddenly arrived at the tribe. The villagers quickly knelt down to greet them. The chief hurried to present their offerings to Lord Kim, but through their conversation, he learned that Lord Kim hadn't come for the tribute at all. It turned out that not long ago, 2 soldiers on patrol inside the forbidden area discovered 15 horribly mutilated corpses. From the unique tattoos on their hands, they identified them as Jurchens from the neighboring tribe across the river, who had entered the area to pick wild ginseng, only to be brutally killed. At first, it looked like they'd been mauled by wild beasts, but after examining the bodies, Lord Kim realized they had actually been murdered by the exiled royal family living there, because in the dead men's hands were beads that proved it beyond doubt. Meanwhile, trouble was brewing in the south. If the Jurchens found out that their people were killed by Josian soldiers, given the already tense relationship between the two sides, they would surely use this as an excuse to start a war. And if Josian were attacked from both the north and the south, it would be devastating for the entire nation. To erase all traces of evidence, Lord Kim ordered all the bodies to be burned to ashes. Then he summoned Ashen's father, the tribal chief, and told him to go to the Jurchen lands to spread the rumor that their people were killed by a tiger, although they were also of Jurchen blood. Ashen's father and his tribe had long since pledged loyalty to Josian, and under Josian's protection, they naturally followed its orders even when it meant doing things in secret. Once the rumor began to spread, Lord Kim gathered the local villagers and led them into the mountains to drive away tigers to make the whole incident look like an accident. But what they didn't know was that some Jurchens had already mixed in with the villagers. Lord Kim noticed something strange. Normally, tigers would flee at the sound of drums and gongs. But judging by the tracks this time, the tiger had done the opposite, charging straight toward the noise instead. What no one realized was that the tiger had eaten a zombie deer and had already turned into a zombie tiger. Soon, the villagers noticed something moving strangely in the tall grass ahead. Before they could react, the zombie tiger suddenly burst out, attacking them in a frenzy. But how could anyone outrun a tiger? The villagers at the back were taken down one after another. Meanwhile, ignoring her father's warning, Ashen returned once again to that mysterious cave to gather the plants and heal her sick mother, but she had no idea that at the same time, her tribe was being massacred by the Jurchens. When she finally rushed back, the village had already become a living hell. Every single tribesman was dead. The brutal Jurchens hung the corpses on wooden racks, and on one of them, she saw her father's pendant. It was clear that her father, who once spread the false rumor, had also been killed. Ashen fell to her knees in despair and wept uncontrollably. She trudged through the snow to the Josian military camp to find Lord Kim, begging him to send troops for her tribe to wipe out the Jurchens. She didn't know why the Jurchens had slaughtered her people. All she wanted now was revenge. The young Ashen didn't understand that a nation could never start a war just because of one girl's plea. But Ashen declared that if she could avenge her people, she'd do whatever it took. Even if the army couldn't act now, she was willing to wait, no matter if it took 10 years or 20. After hearing her words, Lord Kim was deeply moved and decided to keep Ashen at the army camp. From that day on, the young Ashen was given a corner in the pigsty to live. In the freezing winter, the place was open on all sides and the wind cut through like knives. To stay a little warmer, she had to sleep under the bed covered only by a thin blanket. In the days that followed, Ashen was forced to do all kinds of exhausting chores. Even on snowy days below 40 degrees, she had to wash clothes in icy river water. No matter how endless the work seemed, Ashen would still make time to sneak into the forest and practice her archery skills. Sometimes, she even acted as a spy, secretly approaching the Jurchen camps to gather information. Through it all, her will for revenge never wavered. As time passed, Her archery grew sharper and stronger, from barely hitting targets while standing still to hunting wild deer with precision, even facing wild boars without fear. It was in such harsh conditions that Ashen continued to grow, transforming from a helpless girl into a graceful young woman. Her archery had reached perfection. Every arrow hit its mark with deadly accuracy, some even piercing straight through a tree. But as Ashen grew up, she also drew the unwanted attention of lecherous men. Some soldiers, driven by desire, tried sneaking into her room at night with bad intentions in mind. Though Ashen was strong enough to defend herself now, she held back, remembering her unavenged blood debt, enduring the humiliation in silence. Heaven does not forsake the patient. After more than 10 years of waiting, her chance for revenge finally arrived. Because the peace talks with the Japanese pirates had failed, Joseon was forced into open conflict with them. To prevent the Jurchens from taking advantage of the chaos, Lord Kim called for Ashen and ordered her to infiltrate the Jurchen tribe to gather intelligence. When Ashen reached her destination, she saw that the Jurchens were indeed mobilizing their troops. Taking the chance, she slipped deep inside their camp, but there, she accidentally found her father. It turned out he hadn't been executed back then. Instead, they had cut off his limbs, chained him up and tortured him like an animal. Ashen never imagined her father was still alive nor that he would be living in such misery. It was impossible to fathom the kind of suffering he had endured for more than 10 years. At that moment, Ashen was heartbroken beyond words. She desperately pulled at the chains binding her father, trying to take him away from that place. But by now, her father wanted only to die. If he could die by his daughter's hand, he would have no regrets. In the end, Ashen had no choice but to end her father's suffering herself. Losing her last family shattered her completely. Her hatred surged to its peak, her eyes filled only with fury and coldness. Before leaving, she set the Jurchen village ablaze. When she returned to the camp, she happened to run into the departing army. Among them were the royal exiles who had once killed the Jurchens. Seeing the feathers on their arrows, Ashen instantly remembered something. Back when she went into the Forbidden Land to pick those strange plants, she had seen the body of a Jurchen warrior, and the arrow in his corpse was exactly the same kind. To confirm her suspicion, that night, Ashen quietly sneaked into Lord Kim's room. Inside a cabinet, she found a secret file detailing the truth behind her tribe's massacre. Every fact written out in black and white. It turned out that Lord Kim himself had ordered the attack to avoid war with the Jurchens. He had blamed the deaths of the Jurchens on Ashen's own tribe, which led to their tragic massacre. In that moment, Ashen finally understood everything. The real enemy had been by her side all along. The true culprit wasn't the Jurchens but Joseon itself, which sacrificed her people to prevent a war between nations. She swore to make them pay dearly, even if it meant making the entire Joseon kingdom regret it. Soon, she came up with a brutal plan for revenge, to use the resurrection plant that could bring the dead back to life. That night, a soldier once again crept into Ashen's room just like before, but this time, it would be his last. Ashen slit his throat without hesitation, then used the strange flower to bring him back. The resurrected soldier instantly turned into a bloodthirsty zombie and began attacking everyone in the camp. Another soldier tried to pull him away, but the bitten man was already as good as dead. The panicked soldier froze in fear, not knowing what was happening. He tried to run, but was soon tackled to the ground by the undead. No matter how hard he struggled, the zombie refused to let go. Two more soldiers rushed in but were helpless. They had never seen such a monster before. Spears pierced its body but it didn't even flinch. They could only watch as their comrade was torn apart. When the zombie turned toward them, the two fled in terror, but they didn't get far, falling from a height together with the undead chasing them. Meanwhile, the sleeping soldiers were also slaughtered by Ashen. She revived all of them with the strange flowers, turning them into zombies. A soldier who had just returned from the latrine, ready to sleep, suddenly saw a horrifying scene. A zombie was twisting its body in a grotesque way, slowly moving toward him. The soldier was so terrified he collapsed to the floor, and was soon swarmed and bitten by the undead. The horde then burst out of the barracks, rampaging wildly through the camp, leaving no survivors wherever they went. One officer noticed something strange. He grabbed his weapon to defend himself, but a zombie lunged at him, jaws wide open. He quickly threw an oil lamp at it, setting it on fire, then stabbed it with his blade as it came close. Yet the creature kept moving like nothing happened. Only after a fierce struggle did it finally go still. When he stumbled outside, he saw the entire camp had turned into a slaughterhouse, cutting down several zombies. He tried to escape, but just as he reached the gate, his comrade beside him was struck by an arrow straight through the chest. The officer turned around in shock and saw Ashen standing high above, bow in hand. Before he could process what was happening, an arrow pierced him too, ending his life. Ashen gazed down at the chaos she had created. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. Screams echoed through the air one after another. The entire camp had become a living hell, with the few surviving soldiers making their final stand. But those who barely escaped the zombies still couldn't dodge Ashen's deadly arrows. One soldier hit trembling in the corner of a room, foolishly thinking he might survive. But Ashen had already seen through everything. At that moment, she looked like death itself, descending with not a trace of mercy in her eyes, and just like that, the entire camp was soon covered with corpses, yet a few lucky ones managed to stay alive. One soldier climbed onto the rooftop, begging Ashen for help. From the look in her eyes, it was clear this man had bullied her before, so she finished him with a clean shot. His desperate scream drew every zombie to him. They grabbed his legs and tore into his flesh, while Ashen calmly took out a bottle of oil and poured it over the horde, then loosed a flaming arrow, burning them all to ashes. As dawn broke, Ashen deliberately left one man alive. Only those who had tormented her deserved such mercy. She bound the soldier and dragged him away, all the way back to her tribe's old village. As she stepped into a wooden hut, a crowd of undead suddenly appeared before her eyes. They weren't strangers, but her own tribespeople who had died years ago. It turned out Ashen had never buried them. She had brought them back with the resurrection flowers. From that moment on, she learned that the revived would become bloodthirsty monsters, which inspired her plan to use them for revenge. She had been feeding them with animals all these years, but now that her vengeance was complete, she decided to give them a new kind of feast. She shoved the captured soldier into the horde, and within seconds, he was completely devoured. Finally, her people could rest in peace. But Ashen's plan didn't end there. She intended to spread her vengeance across all of Joseon. Ashen traveled to the royal capital and offered the resurrection flowers to the royal physician, intentionally setting off a brand new zombie outbreak.